You're watching Schmooze Queen TV. This October 2007 podcast features a conversation with highly acclaimed New York filmmaker Jennifer Fox, creator of the documentary titled Flying: Confessions of a Free Woman, currently screening throughout North America.
Jennifer Fox, it's such a wonderful honor to have you here from New York. Your film, Flying: Confessions of a Free Woman. After 4 years, has your opinion changed about marriage and about relationships and your view that you had when you set out?
Something about relationship changed so totally, both by talking to the other women and, my evolution in the relationships I was having. And I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen the film, but I think my whole idea of relationship was turned upside down during that period. And I think I had so reacted to this kind of stiff model of marriage as a kind of 50s model, which seemed so dead to me, that the only thing that was important to me growing up out of my family was kind of passion, and I could care less about commitment and security and relationship. In fact, it was like I was looking for cosmic connection more. And so I've had these, relationships over the year. I would call myself years a serial monogamist. Right before I started to make this film, a relationship that I thought was kind of the one and only ended. And this was a man that I thought, okay, I've lived this very untraditional life, but I finally met the one who I was going to marry, even though I didn't want to get married.
Right.
But it was like all the old beliefs summed up at this moment. It was my late 30s. And I thought, okay, this is what I've been building to. And the relationship didn't work out. And I just lost it, because kind of the old rules and yet the way I were living suddenly came undone. Mm-hmm. And it was like nothing, everything just disintegrated. And it's really when I saw that I'd been living a false life, that I'd been living as if I was free, but really, really still believing in all the old rules.
Right.
And all the traditional roles of women. And I think that's why at the set of the film, and the need to make the film was so great, it was like, okay, if everything's up for grabs, who am I? What's important? What does it mean to be a woman today? And what does relationship mean? And that's why also I threw monogamy out the window. I mean, well, because that also is a construct, maybe. So in the course of the 4 years making the film, I think what I really did was learn from the beginning about relationship and what it really meant. And in the middle of the film, as you know, my Indian friend kind of calls me to task, my new Indian friend that I didn't even know before.
Right.
And she basically says to me, you don't know anything about love. And that was a big shock for me.
Yeah. Marrying for love, marrying for passion. You think you were in lust with Kai and really in love with
Patrick. I think life is very complex. So I don't think I would say that I was just in lust with one and in love with the other. And I think there are different kinds of love. I would be a little more complex than my Indian friend. And I think you can love two people at once. And the complication is human attachment and emotion, and jealousy is so strong that that really awakes everybody's issues. And I don't have anything against it. I think it's circumstantial. I think every person should do what is right at that moment of time. I mean, I'm back to monogamy.
Still with?
I'm not telling you who I'm with, because then I'll ruin it. Monogamy is fine, but it isn't what it was before, which was a rigid idea. Now, I could definitely see that circumstances may come and I may sleep with somebody else, and it's not the end of my current relationship, you know.
Throughout your film, you were free to explore whatever you felt like doing at that particular time. You know, our mothers' ages and grandmothers' ages never had that freedom, and they were stuck in roles. It became very clear through all the women you interviewed in different cultures where they weren't allowed to leave the house, where there was female circumcisions, where there definitely cut and dry roles and rules for women, what they could and could not do. Whereas in North America, there is no rigid role or standard for the modern day woman.
Kind of the bigger problem that we have is more internal voices, and that can be very traditional. And I think that is the kind of conundrum of the modern woman and man, is the old and the new in a huge clash. Because we say, you know, there are no rules anymore, but most of us are living under horrible internal prisons.
Right.
And also we live with parents and grandparents and social construct that are very strong. And I think why I so rebelled against my parents' world was that there were all these rules, but where was the real vibe and emotion and aliveness within it? People say, I love you, but where was the love?
The number of women you interviewed, and the Somalian women, and just women had no concept of pleasuring themselves, and the M word, masturbation. Do they really feel that their role is that of wife and mother and forget self-pleasure?
We're only one generation out of the box. I mean, I don't think my mom was ever taught about pleasure. I think she had pleasure, and I think she was unusually a woman who did enjoy sexuality, and she made that very clear. But nobody ever told her about that. And certainly my grandmother didn't have a word for pleasure. I mean, I remember her saying to me, you know, I was such a dummy. I didn't even know what sex was. You know, I mean, and then she said something really unbelievable. She said, he wasn't a very good lover. To remember that we're living in very unusual times. And if you look back, you know, basically up to the last 100 years, women were basically slaves of men for thousands of years. So we're living in a period of kind of unrecorded history. And that, you know, when I understood that, that just blew me away. You know, we were just like dogs and cats and cattle, primarily. Now, of course, there are women around the world who, of course, still live like that. It's our job to realize they are our sisters and we are their sisters, and they are not so different than us. Because I also remember what a struggle to have pleasure it was for me. I mean, it took me years before I felt anything. I had to really say, I will not live without this in my life. And so I can relate to the Somali women, you know, I totally relate to them. And I say, you know, it's only because there was a seed of consciousness, because in my culture there was the idea of pleasure, that I struggled against all the repression that I was raised with. So I actually don't see them as so different than me.
We are really torn between being, you know, these virgins and being so pure and being modern women. I truly believe that a lot of men are threatened by it because they don't know how to deal with it.
You know, for me, what you're talking about is really the root of it all. I mean, the root has always been that women's sexuality has been controlled because it scares the hell out of men. If you are that full and alive, you will leave me.
Absolutely.
You will not need me. You know, I mean, literally. So, of course, the first thing historically that's been controlled is our sexuality. And that's why in all repressive cultures, women's sexuality are repressed and controlled. That's why we're covered up, because we are so, our joy, our pleasure is so threatening that we must be hidden. Otherwise, we will be too free to even need them, I think. And also, there is also the whole, I think that in certain cultures, the whole idea that women will seduce men, that women will, you know, that men somehow will lose their mind. That's historical.
What are you going to be doing next? I'm sure you've got another big explosive documentary coming up. Whoa!